This is Play-by-Playcast,
Is that faster than a Greyhound?
the podcast about play-by-play guys, for play-by-play guys, by, I'm told, a play-by-play guy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now here's the host of Play-by-Playcast, Tom Bodett. Wait, the Motel 6 guy?
We'll leave the light on for you.
No, Joel Godet.
Joe Godet.
Joel.
Joel?
Joel, with an L.
Okay, here's your host, Joel Godet.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
56-yarder. Does not have the leg. And Chris Davis takes it in the back of the end zone. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game. He ran the missed field goal back. He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field tonight. Holy cow. Oh, my God.
All right, back at it with another episode of Play-by-Playcast, coming your way from the road today. I'm on vacation for the next, well, I guess I've been on vacation this week, and I'm on vacation for the next 2 weeks. So we're in the midst of a 3-ish week vacation. I've been doing some work this week, and I do get back in the middle of that last week. So 2.5 weeks of vacation, of which the last week and a half I'll probably be doing not that much work, much more hiking. But the show goes on. Thanks as always for subscribing, streaming, listening, downloading, however you're getting a hold of this podcast. It is Play-by-Playcast, the podcast about play-by-play broadcasters for play-by-play broadcasters, hosted by a play-by-play broadcaster. Of course, my name is Joel Godet. This is a professional development podcast. First and foremost, it dives into the tips, tricks, experience, stories, process, and preparations of some of the biggest and best play-by-play announcers in the business. And because I'm on vacation, by the way, I lined up a bunch of episodes in advance, so I can tell you exactly who the next several guests of this podcast are going to be. Rod Bramblett, the voice of the Auburn War Eagle Tigers, is with us here this week. Mark Minner from the Butler Bulldogs will be with us the week after that, followed by Mike Curto from the Tacoma Rainiers. We'll head to the minor league baseball ranks the week after that, and then Dan Horde, the now two-time Ohio State Broadcaster of the Year. The Ohio State Broadcaster of the Year, not the Ohio State Broadcaster of the Year. Dan Horde is the voice of the Bengals and the Cincinnati Bearcats. He will be with us coming up about a month's time from now as well. So that is our next 4-week outlook here on PxPCast as I traipse the lower 48. Was in North Carolina at the start of the week, am in Philadelphia at the end of the week. Got a chance to catch a Phillies game, a baseball game I was not broadcasting last night, if you're listening to this on time. So that was kind of cool. And then going out to South Dakota and Montana and I think Idaho. I should probably know that as I'm going there. But heading up to the Pacific Northwest to knock off a couple of states I haven't been to yet. I'm closing in on 50 of the United States. I think this is going to get me to 48, going to Idaho, and I've been to South Dakota, but Montana and Idaho will be first. So I think that's going to get me to 48. Need to find a way to get to Alaska to broadcast a game, and North Dakota, and I think that's it. I think I'm almost done. Neat, interesting side note. North Carolina, though, was the start of this week, and I was there for the National Sports Media Association annual awards weekend / beginning of the week, which is always fun to go to. It's the second time I got a chance to go. It's the first time I was a presenter for that weekend, which was a lot of fun. We talked about it on the podcast a couple of times over the last few weeks, but I gave a presentation on podcasting with Adam Witten. He's the voice of App State football, works for IMG as well as their director of audio operations, and gave what I thought was a really good presentation. Hopefully people got something out of it, but really kind of delved into the inner workings of why you should podcast, how you should podcast, best practices, how long pods should be, all that kind of good stuff. Got a good turnout for it. So it was good to meet some people at the NSMA weekend and convention and awards. Always good to see Bruce Beck, who was the New York Sportscaster of the Year. He's the anchor for NBC4 New York and was one of the heads of the Bruce Beck Iron Eagle Sports Broadcasting Camp that helped me get into this industry. So it was good to see him and Wes Durham and Bill Roth and all those guys and meet Kevin Harlan, which was awesome. He sounds exactly the same in real life. So thanks to Dave Gorin, who runs the National Sports Media Association, for having me out as a presenter this past year. And who knows, maybe we'll do it again next year. It'd be a lot of fun. So we shall see. All right, with that being said, let's dive into it this week with Rod Bramblett, who has been the voice of the Auburn Tigers in some since 2003. That was his first year. Jim Fife was the very well-known, beloved broadcaster for the Auburn Tigers until 2003, when he unfortunately passed away of a brain aneurysm, May 15th of 2003. And at that point in time, Rod Bramblett, who was an Auburn grad, was also already the voice of Auburn baseball, slid into the main chair. He's still the voice of baseball, but since 2003 has now also been the voice of Auburn football and of Auburn basketball. When you talk about big moments and being placed in big moments as a broadcaster, the Auburn Tigers have done well by Rod Bramblett. He has broadcast the College World Series on a couple of occasions. He very nearly got back there again just this year, just this past couple of weeks. He has broadcast 2 football national championships, 1 win, 2010 and 2013. And then they also were undefeated, although not national champions, in 2004. So that was his second season on the job. And then, finally, Bruce Pearl got it done for him. He broadcast his first basketball NCAA tournament just this past year as well. So he's had the trifecta. But what's interesting with Rod Bramblett is, like, if nothing else ever happens in his career, his voice will live on in a couple of big moments already. And I had a conversation with Adam Amin of ESPN, friend of the pod, episode 10 and 11, shameless plug, back during basketball season, though, and we talked about big moments. And he said, and this is even like smaller big moments, but still big moments, over the course of a game, there will be 5 or 6 moments. And you have to hit those. Like, if all else fails, there will be a handful of important big moments in a broadcast, and you have to hit those. And when it comes to Auburn football, in particular, there have been a handful of those big moments for Rod Bramblett. And it goes back to a game, actually, that Adam called with Rod, and you'll hear some of that conversation and backstory on this episode. But, I mean, Rod Bramblett called the kick six, which, if he broadcasts nothing else over the course of his career, that call in and of itself will live on forever. And it comes down to, how do you handle those big moments and sometimes those unsuspected big moments? We'll talk a lot about the kick six, how Rod broadcast that, how he handled it, what he thought going into it, and how that entire play unfolded. But we'll get into much more with Rod Bramblett this week, who is the voice of the Auburn Tigers, who lives for the Auburn Tigers, and whose passion for the Auburn Tigers flows through every broadcast he does. Rod Bramblett joins us this week on PxPCast.
I guess I have to go back to when I was a kid. And what drew me to this profession without me really knowing that I was being drawn to this profession. I grew up not much of an athlete at all, but I loved sports. I was a skinny little kid and never much of an athlete at all. I played sports, but I didn't play them very well. And but
I'm in the same club, so it's
so I love sports. I was borderline nerd, geek, whatever you want to call it, back in the 80s. But my grandfather and I would sit and we'd listen to the Atlanta Braves radio broadcast almost every day in the summer. And we listened to Pete Van Wieren and Skip Carey and Ernie Johnson and those guys. And I always thought, boy, that would be what a cool job. They get to go to these games. They get to watch these guys play. And I grew up a big Georgia fan, so I grew up listening to Larry Munson doing play-by-play. And again, I just, the way they're able to capture the moment and paint the picture, or however you want to say it. Looking back after the fact, I think then I probably knew subconsciously that this was what I wanted to do. And I got into radio my sophomore year in college as just a DJ on the weekends. And a couple of years after that, I kept bugging them. And finally, they said, "Okay, we'll let you do some play-by-play. We got a high school, local private school that we don't even do the games live." And it was on tape delay, and it was I said, "I'll do it. I'll do it. I just want to try it. I just want to see if I'm any good at it." And I wasn't any good at it at all, but I loved it. I just love being around the student athletes. I love being around the coaches. And here at Auburn, it's one of those rare places where radio is still really important. The play-by-play team is still very, very important. People identify with their announcers, the play-by-play guy, the color, and the whole crew. So it's I've been very, very fortunate. But I think my roots in this business go all the way back to when I was little and I couldn't play sports worth a darn, and I wanted to be a part of it somehow, some way.
There was a quote I found in an article that said you felt like you were always it's something that you were meant to do when you look back retrospectively. What do you mean by that, and why do you feel that way?
Well, again, I kind of go back to what I was just talking about when I was little. I had no idea then when I was young, whatever. And I didn't have any idea that would be my career. I had no idea how you would even go into that career. I had no reason to think, because of the fact that I wasn't a great athlete or even an average athlete or even a below average athlete. I was below. I said, there's no way, how do you do even, the thought never crossed my mind. But, looking back now, it's kind of weird. It's kind of karma, I guess, in a way, that I would put myself into spots, that opened up doors to me. And whether it be working at the local radio station and finally getting that chance, whether it be, finally getting hired by at that time what was called the Auburn Network to do affiliate relations in 1996. I've been doing Auburn baseball for like 3 years, and that opened up the door that eventually led to me becoming the lead announcer, which I'm so very, very fortunate to do. But back to your question, I just sit now and I guess, and listen, you're young. You don't know what I'm talking about here. But as you get older and you're older in your career, you tend to, you start looking back. I mean, you start, when you're past the halfway point of your career, which I am, you start looking back, and you just look back at all these little things that happened along the way. And for me, it, just all these little steps along the way tell me, you know what, this is what I was meant to do. Whether I'd be good at it or not, I've been lucky. I've been fortunate as much as I've been, I've been in the right place and at the right time for things to happen. And, to me, that's just an indication of, this is kind of what I was meant to do. And I'm very fortunate because not a lot of people get to find that spot, whether it be in whatever career that they choose. But I've been very, very fortunate.
You mentioned 4 names, the Braves team with Skip and Pete Van Wieren and EJ, and then Larry Munson as well with Georgia. As a kid, you said you liked the way that they were able to capture the moment and relate that to you. But now, even as you've gotten older and you've gotten the perspective that you have, what do you think made those guys so good and attracted you to them, maybe even just subconsciously, and attracted you to what they did in the profession?
I think it's one word: passion. Just when you listen to them, you knew that they were vested in what they were vested in the team that they were calling. They were vested in their job. They were passionate about what they were doing. You could tell that they cared this was more than a job. This was more than, hey, this is my next step in my career to get to this next level, blah, 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 blah. This was what they were meant to do. This is what, I listen to Ernie Johnson, and Pete Van Wieren is my favorite because he was so meticulous in everything he did, but at the same time he was entertaining. I mean, I listen to Pete Van Wieren, and I know that looking back now, having done this for so many years, you can tell those guys were prepared too. I mean, they did their prep work, but I think it was their passion. I just look back and so whenever I got this job, I was taken over for a great play-by-play announcer, Jim Fife. And, here recently we just lost John Ward at Tennessee, and Jim Fife. As you and I sit here and talk today, it was 15 years and a month to the day, I think, when he passed away. And as you and I sit here and talk today, it's the day in which 15 years ago they announced that I was taking over for him. But I just, I think about Jim Fife, I think about Larry Munson, and people have asked me, what about? I mean, you worked with one of them, and you listen to the other, and what stood out. And it's the same thing. It's the passion in which they did the job, and you better love it. You better have some passion for it if you're going to be in it for the long haul, particularly at one place, because it can be a grind.
So two-pronged question. And number one, I you have a diploma from Auburn, so obviously part of it is going to come from there.
Sure.
But where does your passion lie for the team that you cover? And when they win, how do you feel when you go home? And when they lose, how do you feel when you go home?
That's the fine line. I think, and I'm not saying this just me. There are a lot of guys out there who have to walk the line in their play-by-play jobs between professional and fan. People who listen to our broadcast have no interest in listening to a guy or a group of guys that are middle of the road. No interest in that. They can go to ESPN or Fox or wherever and get middle of the road. So it is a fine line between that and being a fan. I probably have a little more fan in me than most, but I think obviously part of it is I'm calling games for my alma mater, which is very, very special. I mean, there are not many guys out there that could say that. But two, I think it's, when you're around a football team or a basketball team or a baseball team like I am on a regular basis, and a lot of guys are, you get to know the coaches, you get to know the players, you know how much work they put into it to be successful both on and off the field or the court. And so you get a connection there. You get a real personal connection to the student athletes and the coaches. And so all of a sudden you're not only vested in your school and how they do on the field or the court or wherever, but you're vested in these young men and women who chose Auburn to come to and get an education and compete. And, and so there's this great desire to have them do well. Now, after wins, it's like any fan. Most recently, the Auburn baseball team won their first regional since 1999 over in Raleigh, North Carolina, at North Carolina State. That moment, watching those kids run out on the field and celebrate was emotional for me. And the day that doesn't become emotional for me is the day I probably should quit. And then you fast forward just a week to Gainesville, Florida, in one of the greatest baseball games I've ever watched played. Auburn loses a heartbreaker in the winner-take-all game to go to Omaha on a line drive in extra innings that pops off of the right fielder's glove and goes over the wall for a walk-off homer. And that's you go from one Monday night or one Sunday with just exhilaration to a week later, and it's as heartbreaking as it can be. But I took more out of the loss. I felt better after that loss because of watching the guys on that baseball team sprint to right field to comfort Stephen Williams, Auburn's right fielder. I mean, to me, that emotion of all of that, that's where you feed off of it. And again, if you're working for one of the big boys and you're not doing play-by-play for a school like we are, you have to be middle of the road. I'm glad I don't. I don't know if I could ever do it. But yeah, the passion is you draw it. For me, you draw it from two places. You draw it from the fact you're doing the games for your alma mater, and the other is just you get to know these kids and these coaches, and it becomes a personal thing for you.
Tell me about that side of it a little bit more. I've seen quotes where you've said that that's what's still cool about it to you, and that brings out the fan in you when you get to know the student athlete. Number one, and this is a more broad question, how do you go about doing that? Kind of what's your approach in terms of developing relationships with the athletes? And then B, over time, how has that changed as you've gotten older, they've stayed the same age, and cultures have changed a little bit as well?
It has changed a lot. I think back particularly with baseball. I just finished up my 26th year. So when I started, I was 27 years old. And that's a much closer age to those kids. And I can see, it was much easier to relate to the kids than it is now. But, the key with the student athletes is just being around them, being accessible to them, going to practice. You listen, basketball and baseball, it's a lot easier to get to know these kids than it is football.
Yeah.
It's just such a bigger deal. There are more of them. They're just harder. You don't have the one-on-one interaction that you normally do with basketball or baseball. And when you travel with those latter two sports, you're with them for longer amounts of time. So it's a little easier to develop those relationships than it is with football. I think with football, it's probably more as important, if not more important, to during the week being around the coaches and developing that relationship with those guys. So, but yeah, it has changed. It has changed. It has become much easier for me to develop relationships with the coaches quicker than it is the kids because the interests are different. The attention span is different. That's for sure. And but I've been very, very fortunate to be around a lot of just amazing student athletes, and from those whose names you would recognize to those who never were ever going to do anything beyond college. It's cool to be able to still stay in touch with those kids.
Well, let me ask you about a guy like, if we're talking like a Cam Newton, in terms of being the Auburn voice and wanting to convey information about him and his story that is maybe unique to your audience. Obviously there's going to be a lot written about a guy like that. But how do you talk to a guy like that and have a relationship with a guy like that when he's not around long, and when he is around, everybody wants to talk to him, and it's hard to be able to get something about him that isn't kind of a mainstream news article already?
Cam is probably the most unique case that you could have brought up. You compare Cam Newton to Jarrett Stidham now, Auburn's quarterback. It's much easier to get to Jarrett on a regular basis just to see him. I'm so fortunate here. Even though I don't work for the university or the athletic department, my office is in the old basketball arena. And there's some academic folks and that type of thing that are on our hallway. So I get to see student athletes coming up and down our hall all the time. And Jarrett's one that always stops by and says hi, and we'll talk a little bit. Cam Newton was a different beast all the way around. I'll be honest with you. Not many people got to know Cam Newton while he was here. It was just, and it's not that he was a bad kid. It's just that the demands on his time were so great.
Yeah.
In that 1 year, imagine the spotlight in that 1 year, how bright, hot it was. And this kid still had to go to class. And by the way, he made good grades, too, while he was here. A lot of people just assume, well, he never went to class. He was never going to be there more than a year. Well, that's not true. But he was just harder. They being the football staff, support staff, coaches, whatever, they kept Cam in a little bit of a bubble because they just could see how demanding demanding it could be for him to balance, being a student athlete or being a major college football player, best player in the country, and a student at the same time. So Cam, you know what? I didn't get an opportunity to really get to know Cam that much. It was an odd year in the sense that yeah, he was here and gone, but what an incredible year and a national championship. But that's a rare case. I mean, that really is a rare. Cam's a rare case. Most anybody else you would ask me about, I could say, yeah, again, it just goes back to being around and getting to know him. But with Cam, it was very, very different. And the neat thing is that could have easily turned into something negative with the team, because you get that one guy, and all of a sudden it appears that he's getting special treatment. He was just getting different treatment. He wasn't getting better treatment. He was just getting different treatment than the normal student athlete. But it didn't. That was a group of kids on that 2010 team that were made up, I think, of 30 seniors, the biggest senior class ever for an Auburn football team. And the fact that they were such an older, mature team, I think, helped kind of get past anything that would have been distracting or negative about the way they had to handle Cam because of all the attention that was surrounding him.
What was broadcasting a national championship like in 2010?
Well, you don't have time, and you know how it is during a season. You're holding on for dear life. You don't have a lot of time to sit and appreciate what's going on until after the season. But, you could see that Auburn was headed towards something pretty special as you got to the last month of the year and had something special with Cam and all of that. But, it was one of those deals where you didn't, for Auburn, it was the first time since 1957 that they had won one. And, that week in Arizona was kind of surreal, to be honest. Your normal routine is you go to do a game away from home. You go the day before, you get up, you go to the stadium, you call the game. This was completely different. We were out there for 7-8 days, I think, leading up to it. And there was a little something every day that you had to attend or talk to an Auburn group somewhere, and it was very, very different. The game itself, I'm a little nervous before every game that I do. It's to this day. I still get a few butterflies. I had a ton of butterflies before my first game after Jim Five passed away. It was, that one. I was surprised I was able to talk, but that game, I had more butterflies than my first ever game as Auburn's football play-by-play announcer. And the reason why is that you knew that, particularly if Auburn won, whatever you said from kickoff to the end of the game would be magnified tenfold. Every big play, good or bad. And I think the whole crew was that way. Our whole Stan White, Clint Riggins, the whole crew that were part of the team then. I think we all felt the same way. And the game, and I never, ever, and I had not done it up to that point, and I haven't done it since. I never, ever had written down, all right, if Auburn wins, this is what I need to say. I've never done that. But I was sitting back there about 2 hours before kickoff in the little press area, and I got to thinking, Rod, if Auburn wins, you better not screw it up, because that thing's going to be played over and over and over. So on a little notepad, I wrote down what I wanted to say. And I tore it out of the little notebook pad and I put it in my pocket. And as we were getting to the end of the game, I took it out. I laid it in front of me. Of course, Auburn kicks it's a last second deal. So it kind of sort of threw out the window what I was going to say, because my plan was, well, Auburn will be up, and, we'll count the clock down, and but no, it was pretty dramatic. I didn't even look at the sheet of paper because of the way the game ended. But what you hear in the final call is pretty much what I had written down. But I've never done that before, and I haven't done it since. Even in 2013, when Auburn played in the championship game, I didn't write anything down. But I knew that I'd better write something down this time because, God, it's been since 1957 since Auburn had won a national championship. But, yeah, it was a bundle of nerves start to finish. I mean, it just really, really was. And interesting story from that game, and I'm sure if you've watched the game, you remember this play. The best, and I rarely toot my own horn, but my best call in that game is one that you will never hear replayed because it got overturned. It was the long Michael Dyer run for a touchdown with about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to go in the game. And they called it a touchdown, and they came back to review it, and they overturned it, said his knee was down. Well, I guess it was about a minute to go in the game, actually, because it was down there when they kicked the field goal. But I turned to Stan White on the radio. I was like, man, oh, man, I hope they don't overturn this call because that was a really good call. And they overturn it. So you'll never hear that call anywhere. But that would have been a touchdown that would have sealed the victory, but it got overturned.
We had Wes Durham on the pod a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him this question about doing the Super Bowl. From a preparation standpoint, when you're doing a game of that magnitude, I mean, you're there for 7 days, and there's so much going on, and you're at all these events where you're learning and talking and seeing and doing, and there's obviously tons of media. Like, it's almost too much birthday, and you're nervous enough as it is. How do you get yourself, or how did you get yourself in the right mindset to just call the game and tune out enough noise so that you're not overloaded and you're buried under your own prep, but that you've
right.
done enough prep so that you are actually prepared?
I think the whole thing, from a preparation standpoint, I'll start there. From a preparation standpoint, you must keep your routine. It's just like a team getting ready for a game. You can't, just because you're playing for a national championship, you need to do this on Monday because you've always done it on Monday. You need to do this on Tuesday just because you always do it this way on Tuesday and leading up to a game. It's the same thing that would be my advice to a play-by-play guy, no matter what the magnitude of the game is. That week it was a little more difficult because the schedule was a little wackier. But I tried to each day do what I normally would do, 2 days out, 3 days out. And that's the key. Now, when you get to game day for something like that, it is, even though you're nervous, and listen, I'm not going to lie to you. It's not your typical game. It's not even the Iron Bowl. It's not, an SEC championship game. It's different. So you're more nervous than you probably normally would be. But because your prep has been the same, as close as possible leading up to the game, I think that helps. It doesn't help 15 seconds before you're supposed to start talking because you're like, oh my God, here we go. I'm really about to do this. We're really about to do this. But I think that first, I'll tell you when I remember the nerves settling down a little bit in that game was, I can't remember. I can't remember if it was a big defensive play or a big offensive play that Auburn made. I wish I could tell you. But it was that first big positive moment in the game that you kind of got, okay, this is all right. This is just like any other game in the sense of how you're going to call this thing. But I think it all goes back to routine. And that's what I tell, kids in communications classes here, that want to get into this business, whether it be radio or TV. I was like, it goes back to your question about passion. I tell them there are 2 P's that they have to be concerned about. If you can handle these 2 P's, you'll be successful, and that's passion and preparation. The preparation you can control 110%, and you rather over-prepare than under-prepare. And I think the fact that if you're able to develop a routine in your preparation, that gets you ready to handle whether it be a national championship game or a Super Bowl broadcast. It just, the routine part of the preparation helps you the most, I think.
All right, we'll get you back to Rod Bramblett here in just a second because we are about to talk about the Kick Six. But before we do that, I want to take a quick second to tell you about Audible.com. Listen, we all listen to audio. We're all in audio. You're listening to a podcast right now. And when I drive in the car for really long distances and I get through podcasts or I listen to a couple of podcasts and I need to change something up, I'll be honest, sometimes I'm just looking for a good audiobook, something that's going to really carry me over the course of a longer period of time. And I've actually found audiobooks as podcasts before. I've listened to some Agatha Christie, like book on tape podcast type things in the past, but this is far better than that. It's Audible.com. They have over 180,000 titles for you to choose from for your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, or your MP3 player. And for listeners of PxPCast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook for you to keep if you check out Audible.com. Listen, we talk on this podcast all the time about how do you get a better vocabulary, how do you get more well-read, how do you have a more worldly view on things. Well, look, you read books, read magazines, read things. If you don't have time to read, have somebody read to you. And that is what Audible.com is all about. To download your free audiobook today, head to audibletrial.com. That's AUDIBLE trial.com/PxPcast. That's audibletrial.com/PxPcast for your free audiobook. Now back to Rod Bramblett. Let's talk about a moment that you couldn't possibly have prepared for, though. And this is not a national championship moment, and that's ironic because it's probably the most famous call you've had. Do you remember anything about the Kick Six, or did you just kind of like go into a euphoric what the heck is happening state, and afterward you're like, wow, that was cool?
It's interesting because I'll go back 2 weeks to the Ricardo catch against Georgia, which, by the way, is one of my least. People ask me, what are your favorite calls? Outlaw, that game against Georgia's got to be one of your favorites. I was like, it's one of my least favorites. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, because it caught me completely off guard. And I'm sure that's part of the charm of the call. I don't know, but I just didn't like the call itself. So I spent the next 2 weeks after that game answering the question when I was on the various shows, because then there wasn't a game between Georgia and Alabama. It was an open date. So it was 2 weeks of just build up to the Iron Bowl. And I bet you I answered this question a million times. Do you think the way the Alabama game could top the ending of the Georgia game? And my answer was like, no way. There's no way. I mean, look at it. Auburn was about to lose this game, and they just threw up a prayer and da-da-da-da-da. And my answer was always, there's no way. There's no way. I would always say, now, it's going to be a great game. And it was. It was a great game without Kick Six. It was one of the best. To me, and this would, around these parts, would tick off a lot of the old-timers, it was the best Iron Bowl ever played without Kick Six, because it was headed to overtime. That's never happened. All that was on the line that night nationally. But the call itself, I think because of what happened against Georgia, I was a little more prepared. Now, did I remember what I said? Absolutely not. No idea. I turned to our producer, and I asked her, I said, Jesse, I think I know what I said, but I'm not 100% sure. I hope I didn't screw it up. And she's like, no, I think you did okay. She said, you didn't cuss or anything. But in the moment, no, I had no idea, and I did not hear the whole call in its entirety, where I could actually hear it until I was in my car on the way home. They played it up on the big video screen at the end when all the people were on the field, and I could hear the beginning of it. But as the call went along, the crowd noise was just incredible, which is, again, a moment I'll never forget, the crowd reacting to that replay. But no, I didn't really hear the call in its entirety till I was on my way home that night.
You know, you talk about the Georgia call, the 73-yard touchdown catching you off guard a little bit. When did you realize in the kick six, like, this is more than just we put a guy back there to return? Like, at what point did it dawn on you, oh my gosh, like, this is going to be a big deal?
Interesting story there that I like to share. It did not even cross my mind as Alabama was lining up to kick the field goal that Auburn could put a guy in the back of the end zone to return it. My longtime spotter, Bo Benton, handed me a Post-it note and said, "Hey, Rod, don't forget, keep an eye out, see if Auburn puts a guy back there. They can, if it comes up short, we can run it out." I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't even think about that."
And it's right at the front of the call too, so you were right on top of it.
Well, and when you hear the call, and I said, "Well, I guess when Auburn calls timeout, they take Ryan Smith out of the game, and they put Chris Davis in the back of the end zone because Chris was a little faster runner. And two, they call timeout to hopefully freeze the kicker. But when you hear me say, "Well, I guess Auburn can run it out if it comes up short," that's because my spotter handed me the note to remind me of that. I mean, it just kind of goes to show you how there are a bunch of moving parts in the booth at any given moment. But when Chris Davis got just shy of midfield, and this is looking back on it now, when he got just shy of midfield, I knew he was gone. And you could hear Stan White, my color partner, scream, "Oh my God!" Well, that's when I really knew he was gone. and another interesting story, Stan, after he says, "Oh my God," people often say, "Man, I can't believe how he was able to hold it together." You could hear him scream, "Oh my God," and then he was just able to, he calm himself down. I was like, "Listen, he didn't calm himself down. My engineer turned his mic off." And that's an honest to goodness true story. Our engineer turned Stan's mic off, and if you get like a quiet room or something, you're listening to the call on your computer or wherever, if you listen close, you can still hear Stan just absolutely going nuts because you're picking up his screaming through my microphone. And it was an amazing moment. And I tell people, listen, it's just right place and right time. There were four people that called that play. Myself, Eli Gold, Alabama's play-by-play announcer, of course, Vern Lundquist, and there was also national radio there.
Adam Amin, that's sitting right in front of me. And at that time, Adam Amin was not Adam Amin. You know what I mean? He was very talented. You knew he was going to be a really good broadcaster. But I'll never forget after the game, before I had to go down and do the post-game stuff that I normally do, Adam comes up. They were out on the photo deck in front of us broadcasting. He comes up in the press box. He said, "Rod, I got to get a picture." He said, "I got to get a picture with the field behind us because I think we're going to remember this day and talk about this day for the rest of our lives." And so now, every time I see Adam, we reminisce every single time. And it's created a nice little bond. But there are so many little stories like that involving different people, whether it be professionally or fans that were at that game, that stories that are being told, and then all the videos that you see from people who are watching the game on YouTube and their reaction. It's just, I don't know, and I know you're supposed to never say never, but I just don't see how there can be another finish or moment like that
considering everything that was on the line.
Right, that's what you said after the Georgia game, Rod.
That's right. I was wrong then, but little did I know. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. It is really just amazing. And the following, it's funny, and you know how it is. That time of year, you're going from football right into basketball in November. So you know, we call the game on Saturday. I go back home, and I have to get right back up and leave right after lunch out of the Auburn airport on a team charter to go to Ames, Iowa with the basketball team. I mean, it's just like you go from this really big high to calling a basketball game at Iowa State that Auburn was going to lose by 40, and they did. So, I mean, it's just but that Sunday night and Monday, particularly during the day, that Monday after the Iron Bowl was surreal as well, because all of a sudden the realization kicked in of how big a deal it was. It really didn't kick in immediately. I thought, yeah, great finish, greatest finish ever in the Iron Bowl, one of the best. I mean, but you didn't realize what an impact it had across the country. And that Monday following the Iron Bowl was just amazing. My morning started at 6 a.m. I had to do a thing on Fox and Friends via the phone, and then it was just back-to-back interviews up until we went to the basketball game that Monday night. And it was the only time in my career before and since that I wish I really had some sort of administrative assistant to schedule all this stuff. But it's something that I'll never forget, and certainly I'd be lying to you. It's career changing, and you know, it's just I'm so honored to have been a part of it, and honored that hopefully I didn't screw it up too bad, and honored that it means so much now to the Auburn fan base, because it you know, it's still, you know, gosh, 5 years later when I go to Auburn clubs, they want to talk about that again. Tell us again about that moment. And, it'll never get old.
Let me take you, if I can, from the incredibly high of a play like that to just the mundane. What's a good call to you on a first down? Like, what's good football or basketball or baseball, for that matter, however you want to spin it, on the radio?
As long as somebody listening can picture in their mind, and listen, I'm not one of these guys like a Jim Fife or John Ward or Jack Crystal. I mean, those guys, they could paint a picture at a different level, because they grew up in a time where radio was the main medium for people to follow these games. I grew up in a time where TV was more prevalent. So, I mean, the picture painting part of it, I'm not even trying to compare myself to that. But I think when I'm listening to a game and I'm just listening to a game, I want to be able to picture. I want to be able to picture the play. So you better tell me who's got the ball, which direction they're running, how many yards quickly. I mean, you don't call the play, he's down, that's a first down. I want to know right then. He picks up 7 yards and a first down over right tackle. And then I want to know the time. And then, you know what? If I hadn't heard the score in a while, I want to know the score pretty quick. And I say that like I'm able to do that every single time, but I'm not. You're not perfect. But I think that's the key. If I'm sitting there listening, I know that Auburn is running from right to left on the football field, that Kerryon Johnson just got the handoff. He ran over the right side, broke a tackle, picks up 6 yards and a first down. It's 1st and 10 at the whatever. 12-2 to go, Auburn leads 7-0. I mean, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. But, you know, as a broadcaster, and I'm challenged with it today. You talk about the mundane, the routine, or even the bad. The bad is the hardest part for me. It's the hardest part for me because of the fan and the passion.
Sure.
I have that fan passion. You can be the big time homer and go nuts when something great's happening, but the fans want to know that you're hurting like they are, but you can't go into fan negativity either. So there's a line you have to stop at. And to me, sometimes that's still a challenge when something bad happens, something unfair happens, when an umpire fails to call strike three on a pitch that's right down the middle, and then the next pitch the guy hits a home run and you get beat. I mean, those things are still a challenge for me, and I'm 52 years old. But yeah, I mean, it's people. It's not rocket science, but it's also not everybody can do what we do. And the only way we do what we do in a consistent, good way, I think, is just repetition and doing it over and over and over and over and over and over. There's no secret formula. The more you do it, if you care about it and you're prepping and you have passion, the more you do it, the better you should get at the mundane stuff. So I don't know. That's an awful long answer for a simple question. So.
No, it's perfect. I want to broach one more subject with you, kind of along those lines as well, before I wrap things up, and that's just how you what your professional development, I guess, is like even today. I mean, how much you listen back to your own stuff, or continue to get better and continue to improve, and be the best version of yourself every day.
I think the key for any guy, any person in any job, is be able to handle criticism, constructive criticism. And for us in this business, that can be hard because we all have egos. That's another thing. We all have egos. In this business, you do this long enough, and you get a little bit of an ego. Now, how you handle that ego varies. Some guys don't handle it very well. So others guys, remain pretty humble, and so, taking self-criticism can be tough. But I think letting your peers listen to your stuff and say, hey, this was good. Here's how I would have done this. I like the way you did that. I'm going to start doing it that way. I think that's a good thing. And, I'm constantly looking for every year, this time of year, June and July, summertime, it slows down. So all of a sudden I go into, okay, how can I make my spotting board better? Let me look at this. I'm going to play around with some stuff. I was just exchanging emails with Tony Castricone, the play-by-play voice of Washington, new play-by-play voice out there, and I saw he posted on Twitter. He was working on his spotting boards, and he had a picture of them. And I said, okay, that looks kind of neat. It's a little different than I do it. So I reach out to him and say, hey, can you send me, a copy of that? Well, I've looked at it, and you know what? I've compared it to what I've done. It's like, no, I still like mine better. But I do. It's never ending. Every baseball season, I was like, okay, I make my own scorebook and I print them out myself, and I say, okay, how can I make this better? How can I make this easier for me? The older I get, the bigger the print is, that's for sure, because my eyesight's getting worse and worse. But it's just that never-ending, desire or need to try and improve what you do or how you do it. For me, I find myself looking at different ways I can prepare better, more efficiently. The older you get, when you're young and enthusiastic and really, really passionate about it, and you'd work on it 24 hours a day. The older you get, you're looking for ways to still prep effectively, but more efficiently too. I just think that, again, a long answer for a simple question, but to shorten it up, I just think you have to keep an open mind and realize, you know what? I don't care. I may have been doing baseball at Auburn for 26 years and football and basketball for 15 and play-by-play in general for 30. But you know what? I don't know everything. I don't even know half of everything. I don't even know a third of everything about being a good broadcaster and play-by-play guy. And so you just need to keep that open mind and listen. This is not an original sport or original business. Everybody copies everybody. You hear some, that's why I love satellite radio. I love listening to guys call baseball games for the different major league teams and go, wow, I've never thought about describing it that way. I'm going to use that. So I think we all can feed off of one another and learn from one another, and you know, to use an old, I can't remember who said this. Was it Hillary Clinton? Takes a village. It takes a village. I don't know. And,
she might have said it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what. I can't remember who said that. But anyway, I think as a group, we're play-by-play guys are part of a really cool fraternity, and we get to do a lot. We get to do what a lot of people wish they could do, and it's our responsibility. I think it's our responsibility to keep getting better and keep offering a product to our fan base, whatever that fan base may be. Offer our fan base a better product every time we go out. Not always successful in doing that, but you got to keep trying.
Rod, if people want to track you down on social media or catch the Auburn Tigers, how do they go about finding you?
Well, social media is an interesting beast, isn't it? I tell you, it's again, it's something I didn't have to deal with when I first started. But I haven't gotten into the Instagram stuff yet. I have an Instagram account. I think it's the same as my Twitter account, but on Twitter it's Voice of AU Tigers. I've been told I better start doing Instagram because this fall, so you may see me a little bit more on Instagram. So anyway, that's how you could follow me.
All right, that's Rod Bramblett joining us here on Play-by-Playcast, the voice of the Auburn Tigers in all sports since 2003. Many thanks to him for hopping on a call and spending some time with us here on, if you're listening to this on time, a Friday morning and being a guest on PxPCast. As always, you can find us on Twitter. We are at PxPCast. I am at Joel Godet, JoelGodett, or you can shoot me an email, jgodett@bsu.edu. Rod, of course, there is at Voice of AU Tigers. And I want to go back to the beginning of that conversation. Passion for Rod Bramblett. And listen, not all of us are going to grow up diehard fans of the teams we wind up broadcasting for. And not all of us are going to be alums of the teams we wind up broadcasting for. Some of us will be. Many of us maybe will be. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, there's only one voice at all of these schools, and many of us went to the same school. So just from a math standpoint, that's just the case. But the passion is something that we can all bottle up into who we are and how we broadcast a game. And it comes down to, a passion for what you do. Loving the craft, enjoying the craft, and enjoying what you're seeing, what you're conveying, and how you're conveying it. But it also comes down to passion for the kids if you're a collegiate broadcaster. And that's one of the things Rod was talking about was, for him, it's always fun. And the most fun thing is getting to know the student athletes year in and year out. And if you let the passion for those student athletes, or those athletes if you're a pro sports broadcaster, shine through, it will be evident to your listenership, and it will make your broadcast better. Don't necessarily have to be a homer, but have passion. You are the broadcaster for your team. I'm the broadcaster for Ball State. And it will show through if I have a vested interest in what Riley Neal is going to do on the football gridiron this fall. And I have a vested interest in what Riley's going to do because I get to know Riley. And I want Riley to do well. And I want the Cardinals to do well. And then hopefully I can convey that energy, that excitement, and that passion and have that transfer over to the listeners at home. Never forget that. And I think that's a really important thing to take out of what Rod said at the very beginning and kind of through the course of our conversation here today. Many thanks to Rod for joining us again at Voice of AU Tigers on Twitter. Our guest next week is the voice of the Butler Bulldogs, Mark Minner, who took over as the voice of the Butler Bulldogs at just 23 years of age, one of the more high-profile basketball jobs in the country. I mean, he took that job pretty dang close to fresh off the heels of back-to-back trips to the Final Four. So Mark Minner will be our guest next week here on the pod. Again, many thanks to Rod. Many thanks to you. They're playing the music, so it's time for me to get up on out here. I'll talk to you next week from somewhere out west. This is Play-by-Playcast, and we're out.